Would you want to have an argument with me if I posited the idea that we live in a world that's anxious? I don't know. It seems to kind of be everywhere, ubiquitous. I mean, to mask or not to mask, that is the question, right? This pandemic keeps changing shapes and forms. But it's not just that. It's the political tension. What furniture of someone am I going to bump into if I accidentally mention a topic? We're anxious about getting into arguments. There's the overall kind of anxiety about climate. There's the anxiety about prices rising and about the catastrophe in the Ukraine. And not just the catastrophe of lives lost, but what about those next Baltic states and what does sovereignty really mean? And me personally, like Taiwan. Anyway, so you feeling anxious yet? A little bit? Which is not to say anything about our personal anxieties, right? Our kids, our parents, our health. But it's not just our personal anxiety. I want to point out the systemic anxiety that I was getting at. That there are systems of anxiety. That we live in a culture that's anxious and a world that's anxious. And the telltale signs of that are like black and white thinking, you're good and I'm bad, or I'm good and you're bad, it's probably more likely. Looking for a savior, right? Someone to give us all the answers and save us from the mess that we're in, even if we know there's not one, the pursuit of it. And perhaps most of all, this sense of rutting out. Like no matter how hard we try, we can't get stuff done. Think about government. You're just digging like a hole deeper and we never go like anywhere. It's personal in our lives. I don't know about you, the pandemic took up too much space, probably still takes up too much space in my brain. I'm not as productive, I don't get as much done, I'm not as reflective. And it's true societally, as an organization that's bigger than us. You didn't know you were coming today to get a lecture on systems, but there it is. But the gurus of systems at MIT are now talking about organizations as having existential crises. That the anxiety in a system is actually about life and about death, about meaning and about identity, as collectives. Bracket that. The hot sun beats down in Jerusalem, and the Roman soldiers walk through the streets, and the sun glints off their swords, and it blinds people when it bounces off their shields. And everyone going to the market walks on eggshells. When will the next act of violence happen? When is the rain gonna come? Is the fever my child has, is it gonna subside? And in Jerusalem, the religious leaders do their best to walk a tightrope, not offending the Romans, because that leads to more death, but trying to keep everyone with their Jewish identity walking the straight and narrow. Build a wall around it, follow the law, know who you are. And in the middle of all of the anxiety of that system comes this teacher with rather inconvenient ideas about inclusion, and he's healing people, and the way he talks about God captures the masses. And the Pharisees are doing this, and the Sadducees are like, what are we gonna do? But Jesus seems to be headed straight for Jerusalem. And so out of their own sense of anxiety, and out of the collective sense of anxiety, the Pharisees go to Jesus and they say, we heard a pretty compelling rumor. Herod wants you dead, you know. He's a little nuts, megalomaniac. It's probably true. So really, don't come to Jerusalem. Change that plan. Stick it in the rural areas. Much safer, Jesus. Don't come to Jerusalem. Their anxiety, it's eating them. And the anxiety of Jerusalem, they're embodying it. Jesus is as non-anxious as they come. He just looks at him. He says, you know what? Tell our friend the fox, Herod, that I have work to do. And I'm going to do it today. And I'm going to do it tomorrow. And I'm going to keep doing it until my work is complete. And so Jesus doesn't even matter if the Pharisees are telling the truth. In Luke, Jesus and the Pharisees are kind of frenemies. Like they'll have dinner and then they'll hate each other by the end of it. It's conflictual based. So most likely, the Pharisees have kind of concocted this rumor. They're probably not telling the truth. In Luke, Herod is more interested in Jesus than his usual murderous, paranoid self. But it just doesn't matter. Jesus is unswayed by the anxiety. He just doesn't need to buy it. He doesn't have to buy what they're selling, and he knows what his mission is. He's going to head to Jerusalem, whatever the cost. His life and his death are rooted in something larger than just himself, in the divine. And that's what raises this lament for him. He's talking about Jerusalem, and he sees all the anxiety and the violence and the pain, and he just says from a deep place, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, out of your anxiety you kill the prophets. You stone the ones who are sent to you. I wish that I could gather you like a hen under my wing. That if Jesus could, he would grab all of the people of Jerusalem and shelter them under the wings of the Holy One. A kind of giant weighted blanket, perhaps, that God would just hold them and make them well and release their anxiety and stop their violence. And of course, it's not to be. Jesus meets a rather horrible end in Jerusalem. But that doesn't mean that that's not what Jesus wants to do. Even to those who will do him violence, Jesus longs to gather them, to hold them under the shadow of the wings of God. And I think it's that image that sticks with me, at least out of this text. That drawing on that Hebrew imagery of the sheltering under the wings, this extremely vulnerable hen, right? N.T. Wright says this image comes out of a field fire. That the hen would gather the chicks under her wings and she would be totally destroyed and charred by the fire, but the chicks would survive. It's even more powerful if that's true. Jesus, of course, will be burned up by the anxiety in Jerusalem. But that doesn't mean that God doesn't want those people to find shelter under the maternal wings of God. And that's where Jesus has found his shelter. Jesus spends an enormous time in Luke and the other Gospels apart, praying, getting his identity straight in God. Another way of saying that, spending time under the sheltering wings of the divine. He finds his calm there, his peace, his identity, his purpose. And so he can hold his life and his death more loosely. He can be who he needs to be in the world because he's found himself under the shadow of the wings of God. And so he offers a model for what that might look like in the world. That he doesn't need to buy into the anxiety of his system. He doesn't need to go where the Pharisees tell him to go. He sticks to his mission. On today and tomorrow and the third day, that's a pretty resurrection-laden phrase, isn't it, friend? And the word that they use, he's going to reach his goal, he's going to reach completion. That actually, if he turns aside, if he doesn't go to Jerusalem, if he stops healing and teaching, he will actually miss out on what will complete his work in the world. It won't happen if he doesn't go to Jerusalem. If he doesn't know who he is and he doesn't know what his mission is and he buys everyone's anxiety, he'll miss who he's called to be in this world. The anxiety in Jerusalem, I don't think it's a difference in kind. It's just a difference in degree from our anxiety. And the anxiety that plagues our world, or more pertinently America, or Erie, or even this cathedral, or our own lives. Change creates anxiety. There is lots of change. But God offers us a different way to think about it. And I wonder how it is for you. I wonder what system anxiety pulls at your soul and asks you to go in a direction that you know isn't really the one that's right for you. That asks you to subsume your own self for the sake of some sort of system of anxiety. It happens to us all. But I wonder what it would be like if instead we found ourselves under the shelter of God, under the maternal wings of the Holy One. Part of the thing to do is to catch the anxiety when it happens. What would it be like in moments like that to center ourselves, to take a breath and remind ourselves under whose wings we truly find shelter? The Holy One covers us, offers us a different way. And that when we do that, when we ground ourselves in the Holy One, it changes how we understand our work in the world. Because each of us is beloved, and each of us has something that is ours to do in the world. And if we listen to everyone's anxiety, we'll miss what's ours. We won't find our own kind of completion. And wouldn't that be tragic? This passage offers us a way to think about it, a way to think about finding who we are in the shelter of God and walking forward into the world less anxiously. I said this last week, it's going to, I guess, be my new catchphrase. I'm not offering you a panacea, and I'm not saying it's easy. You can get me so spun up about climate in about 2 seconds flat. And my anxiety matches no one. I mean, probably it does, but who are we going to hire for an associate priest? Where are we going to find a full-time musician? What are we going to do about poverty? What about domestic violence? What about my kid's birthday cake? Did I get the right fire truck on that? And what am I preaching next week? And pretty soon I'm reading too. So I'm not preaching from a place of superiority. I just know what it's like to be caught in anxiety, and I think God offers us something. What would it be like for us to find our shelter in the shadow of the Most High? To ground ourselves under the wings of God, and to live from that space, to be who we really are. I think it would change our lives. And I think living like that would be a different model. Maybe that's what the church is for, to show people what it might look like, to live less anxiously in an anxious world. May we find our comfort in God, and may our lives replicate it for others.